Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. Your digital identity is more like your signature than your fingerprint. It's unique to you, but it can be faked. A recent executive order from the Trump administration has stirred a lot of discussion for what it does and doesn't say about how they plan to approach digital identity for federal agencies. Here with insight into the details of that EO is the head of public sector for Socure, Jordan Burris. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me.
Terry, I am so excited to be here today.
I just want to start with sort of a general level setting because digital identity gets tossed around a lot, but help us understand exactly what it means when we're talking public sector and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely, Terry. So digital identity is foundational to how we interact in an increasingly digital world, right? It enables people, organizations, and even their devices to authenticate and authorize themselves across online and offline services. Understanding its current state and importance requires diving into both technical and societal dimensions.
And so how would you evaluate the state of the art in the public sector, especially with federal government agencies today?
So it's interesting. Digital identity has been an ongoing conversation for decades now at this point, right? As we've seen organizations continue to move towards more digital channels for operations, the evolution of how we've discussed identity as a practice has continued to evolve. Frankly, today, digital identity is essential to delivering services for the American public, and more organizations are becoming reliant on having more effective digital identity practices.
When we say digital identity, you just said something that sparked a question for me. It's one thing to think about how we digitally verify the federal workforce themselves who's working on federal computers. It seems to be another about how we digitally verify the public and how they interact with federal programs.
Yes, you know what? That's absolutely right. Historically, the way in which we've approached verifying the workforce and looking at, who someone is as they're part of the public when engaging online has differed. I do want to take a moment to take just a quick step back, right, and look at the fact that digital identity is really the representation of different attributes and credentials that uniquely identify who you are as a person, right, online, right? This could be the combination of personal identifiers. Think of your name, your date of birth, your social security number, perhaps. It could be biometrics, right? It could be the images that we have, or maybe even your fingerprint or your voice print at the end of the day. And then, what we'll say is digital credentials. This could be everything from the devices that you're using, the email that you're perhaps leveraging as well, and or the well-known IP address that's coming from your home office, right? All of these things, when put together, can present context about who you are, and it becomes increasingly more important when we're talking about determining who someone is online, especially when we've never met them in person.
And one of the reasons that's so important for federal programs is because identity fraud is a source of real concern, especially in federal benefits programs, right?
Absolutely. So this has been an ongoing and, if you will, skyrocketing issue for over a decade now at this point, right? I can tell you back when I used to work in the federal government, so I had the opportunity to serve as chief of staff in the White House office of the federal CIO, back in, and many times I get on my stump speech about this, but back in the 2017, 2018 timeframe, we used to talk about the fact that with the proliferation of data breaches as they existed today, that everyone's PII was well known, which basically meant that the way in which we were able to assert and prove who we are could no longer be reliant on just data you have about yourself, because everyone at that moment had it. We even called for modernizing the overall approach that we took to validating and confirming who someone's identity was, looking beyond even what NIST had put on the books at the time, which is still largely being followed by the federal government. What I can tell you is that since that time frame, not much has changed in terms of the requirements for validating identity. However, what we have seen change is just I'm going to say, the focus that nation states and other groups have played into disrupting benefits delivery, federal operations overall by impersonating good people online.
I'm speaking with Jordan Burris. He's the head of public sector at Secure. Well, Jordan, with that as a background, I want to tackle the recent Trump executive order that addressed cybersecurity and included some comments about digital identity, or some provisions about digital identity. It stirred quite a bit of conversation. What's your take on the major provisions there?
Yeah, I think generally what this, I'll harken back to just kind of what it means and kind of the wake of what happened with the executive order. I think in reality, much of what was rescinded as part of the executive order from the Biden administration publicly mentioned how it was basically lackluster in the sense that it didn't actually do much to stop and curb the existential threat we have from nation states today. However, what it really did was, if anything, drive more of a need for the administration, the Trump administration at this point in time, to take action as it relates to digital identity. Now, I've been, since I'm no longer in government and working adjacent as a partner to government, I've seen year over year how there's been a lot of conversation around digital identity, around identity fraud. However, the actions have not lived up, if you will, to kind of the threats that we're seeing and the issues, challenges that we're seeing today. I think that really with the executive order being issued, it's an opportunity and a moment for the Trump administration to really start to lean in and find a way that they start to put out really more of a cohesive approach to tackling this issue. So
with that strategy in mind, what do you expect the immediate impact of the EO to be?
A lot of questions, frankly. I think a lot of questions kind of going back to the drawing board. I think that, generally what we're going to see is that, look, there's a lot of great work that's already being done in the federal government. There's a lot of agencies that are leaning into what I would say kind of an AI first mindset into how they start to address some of the threats that we're seeing with digital identity. I think generally the next thing that's coming is really needs to be a push from the administration really to garner what I would call a national strategy around digital identity, right? I've called for many years now, saying that we need to have kind of more of a cohesive thought about how we're going to approach digital identity across the U.S. I think there's a moment and opportunity for the Trump administration to do that. I would also say that really what we need to do is get serious about leveraging AI, other emerging technologies to curb the threat from nation states and other actors. I'll tell you, our company put out research highlighting what we've seen related to government fraud or identity fraud within the ecosystem. And what we're seeing today is that basically there is an uptick and rise from nation states. You can think China, you can think North Korea, Russia, but also other European fraud rings that are attacking government programs. They're using stolen identities and they're using them across state borders. So they don't care about what states they're going after, but they'll take Jordan's information and use it state after state to see whether or not that they can intercept and obtain a benefit. And then they'll use this to basically further their ongoing schemes, whether that is seeking to obtain more benefits or using it for other purposes, such as, those would be acts of terrorism or human trafficking, et cetera.
So you mentioned that you think this executive order lays the groundwork for a national digital identity strategy. How would you see that being developed? Who would be in the lead for it? Who would be included? What their key considerations would need to be?
Yeah, and I think from where I sit, I would say the executive order itself, if you will, cleans the slate such that a strategy can be put in place. I think there was an overemphasis on a particular solution, whereas there are aspects of different solutions, such as mobile driver's licenses, which will be part of the equation. I don't think that they're the panacea and the end all to the story. I think when we're talking about what does it take to build a national strategy, I mean, look, the reality is the White House is going to have to lead here. You're going to have to see the National Security Council. You're going to have to see the Office of the National Cyber Director, even my old office and the Office of the Federal CIO all come together to put really what would be a comprehensive approach in place, and then work with state partners because generally, even beyond what gets implemented at the federal level, the states are the ones that are administering these programs. And so thinking from the federal viewpoint all the way down to the state and local viewpoint, right? It's going to take that type of level of engagement, Candidly, I would also say that, the best laid strategies within federal government also involve private sector input. So generally, we've seen the most success when there has been this, public-private partnership and collaboration in order to drive progress in any of these key areas.
And are you seeing any evidence of that outreach from the administration at this point?
I see early starts from the administration. There's definitely, again, a lot of conversation related to it. I think just frankly from where I sit, we need to be doing more as a country and if anything, going faster.
I've been speaking with Jordan Burris. He's the head of public sector at Socure. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your perspective.
Harry, I appreciate you having me on the show.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Still to come, how the Israel-Iran ceasefire and U.S. critical infrastructure might be related. But first, who is most at risk of insider theft of national security technology? It might not be who you think. You're listening to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network.